Good evening, and welcome to the General Society of Mechanics and Tradesmen of the City of New York. I am Karen Taylor, Program Director of the General Society. This program is supported in part by public funds from the New York City Department of Cultural Affairs in partnership with the City Council. I would also like to express our appreciation to Thomas Donahue, our window curator, who installed a special window display for tonight's talk, and in fact is here. Thomas? He's being anonymous, but he's here. So please, it's a really wonderful display, and if you have a chance, please look at it when you leave. The General Society was founded in 1785 by the skilled craftsmen of New York City, artisans who represented 22 different trades, among them carpenters, silversmiths, saddlers, and tailors. Today, our 234-year-old organization continues to serve the people of the City of New York through our educational and cultural programs, including our tuition-free Mechanics Institute, our Lock Museum, which is upstairs, and you're welcome to browse through the locks after the lecture, and the library, of course, of which you're in this evening, and finally, our nearly 2-century-old lecture series, of which, of course, the Artisan series is part of. And, of course, the Artisan series is also a tribute to those original 22 founders. You will find additional information on the General Society on the blue and white postcard on your seat. This evening, we have something very special, a conversation with an exceptional chef and restaurateur, Sohui Kim. And before we begin, I just want to express our thanks to the co-curator of the Artisan Lecture series, Rhett Butler, for suggesting. Sohui. This evening, Sohui will discuss her career, her 2 Brooklyn restaurants, the Good Fork and Insa, as well as her upcoming launch of Brooklyn's legendary Gage Tollner. She'll also describe some of her other projects, including her cookbooks, the Good Fork, and Korean home cooking, which, by the way, will be available for purchase at the end of tonight's talk. It is now my great pleasure to introduce to you Sohui Kim.
Hello, everybody.
So, as I said, what a pleasure to have you here this evening.
Oh, the pleasure is all mine. Thank you for having me.
We are absolutely delighted. So, we're going to start at the very beginning, or almost close to the very beginning.
Okay.
At the age of 10, you immigrated from Korea to the United States and settled with your family in the Bronx. I was curious to know, was food something that you were always interested in? As a child, did you take a lively interest, or was it something that developed as you grew older?
Yeah, so no, I didn't take interest in food at all, which gives me hope for my 2 little picky eating children. I grew up in a household that celebrated food and used food, to host so many events, and my mother was a fabulous cook. She actually had a restaurant in Korea when I was little. So food was always sort of the focal point. But as a small child, I was not into kimchi, for instance, which is a treasured national dish of Korea. So it wasn't until much, much later that I found the love of food. It wasn't when I was in Korea.
After graduating from college, you were seriously considering attending law school.
Yes.
So what happened to change your mind?
Right, so food. So once my family, we immigrated to this country, I had a very typical upbringing of a typical Korean immigrant family, where my father had, entrepreneurial businesses and worked very hard as an immigrant. And what do immigrants want for their children but a better life? And that means Ivy League education and, respectable professions like doctor, lawyer, of that kind. So I was law school bound, and I was, taking the LSATs and writing to all these, writing applications to law schools. And in between, I would cook at home a lot for friends, who we couldn't really afford to eat at restaurants. So I would have dinner parties, and I really sort of got into it. And it was really a sort of a soul-searching moment, like, do I really want to spend the rest of my life pursuing the study of law, which, was interesting to me at the time. But it really was something about food that called me. So at a very late age, actually, I decided to go to culinary school, which is very different from how a lot of people enter the culinary field. So I was 29 when I went to a place called ICE, and I did, this very short program, and had an internship at a restaurant called Blue Hill, and that pretty much changed everything for me, because that's where I really learned sort of the beauty, the culinary arts, as not just as theater, but just as an art form. And I really wanted to learn more and more. And sort of fine dining restaurants is what sort of called me. So after that, I went and studied under Anita Lowe at a place called Insa. And they were open for about 17 years. And they just closed last year, a Michelin-starred chef. And Anita really served as a wonderful mentor for me. Not just in how to work with food as a work of art, but how to run a great restaurant, basically.
And so, after having these incredible experiences, it was still quite a leap then to open your own restaurant. So was there a particular reason that at that point had you felt like you had apprenticed and been line cooks and all the other terminology you would use for long enough?
Yeah, I think when you get into the kitchen, it's has a certain energy about it, and you sort of develop a certain attitude, a little swagger, a little cockiness. And of course, it was only after 6 years of working for some of the New York City's best, finest chefs. And I thought I was ready after only 6 years. And also, I had started this game a little later than most people, so I felt like I had to sort of catch up. But it wasn't until I met my husband, my partner, that the Good Fork sort of came about as an idea. Could we really open a restaurant? He said he could build it, and I would cook it, and then we'll just open the door and see how it goes. So on a very, very, shoestring budget, we opened the restaurant. 2006 is when we opened. So no, was I ready for it? Absolutely not. But had I known what I know today, I would have never opened the restaurant. But I think that it is with that, a certain naivete and absolute passion to do this thing. And for me, it was to cook my own food. So after only spending, six years, with various chefs, I felt like I knew which direction to take my food. And of course, I didn't even know what that was yet until I opened. And then it was all about making a menu that I wanted to provide. And back in 2006, the word global dining didn't really exist. So when I opened with a menu that had, Asian influence dumpling next to sort of a Korean-style steak and eggs, but I wanted to utilize all the French stuff that I learned, all the interesting high-end fine dining tricks up my sleeve. So I made this menu that was sort of globetrotting, but the word didn't exist. And I remember, some of my friends saying, this is kind of crazy, like this is not very cohesive. And I said, it's okay, because I think that's how people want to eat nowadays. So I think Zagat, when we opened, they labeled us eclectic New American, sort of like grouped, everything sort of grouped in there. But it caught on, people people were, they didn't want the pigeonhole, like, oh, do I feel like Italian food tonight or fancy French food, this global way of approaching food and understanding food. I think that's what people are getting. And it's taken off.
Well, I think it has, because I think any restaurant that's still in existence after 13 years?
We just celebrated our 13th year, like a couple of days ago.
That's fantastic.
Yeah,
that is in
crazy.
New York City, that is really such an accomplishment.
It is, but it's such hard work. I remember a couple of months after we opened, and I think New York Times came, and it drove a lot of people into our small town of Red Hook. And I remember pulling the gates down with my husband Ben, and Ben's like, "How long are we going to do this for?" And I was like, "Oh, it'll die down, maybe a couple more months." So, but it is a feat that we're still around after 13 years.
In reading some of the background information, I did read how in 2012 you certainly had a challenge when Hurricane Sandy flooded the restaurant. Yeah. And even though I believe you worked incredibly hard for 2 months and got up and running, had a wonderful opening night, but then there were challenges.
No one came. No one came.
So that must have been a very hard time.
That was really hard. It was first a decision to reopen. It was difficult. But it was difficult in the beginning, in the very early stages of the destruction and dealing with, the aftermath of it. But once we started to focus on the fact that we're going to rebuild and come back, it was really the support of our friends and neighbors. Not just that, but customers. At that point, we've been open, for about 6-7 years, and Ben and I realized that it didn't just belong to me and him, but to a larger community. So, that's the impact that restaurants have. It's a sense of community. It's a sense of, belonging for a lot of other people. So we did it very quickly because, of my husband's skills as a builder. So we built in 2 months, and I had to sort of rejigger everything. Called a friend of mine who has a restaurant bar in Park Slope to park all of my, cooks there while we rebuilt. And then we came back with a big party, New Year's Eve. And it was a hoot. It was amazing. So many people came, and then 2 days later, after New Year's, like nothing, because it was still a depressed neighborhood, and other businesses were still slow to come back up. So it was a tough time, but we made it through.
You absolutely did.
With the help of some amazing people, and we did a GoFundMe page, which I didn't want to do in the beginning because I felt like that was a bit of a handout. But at the insistence of a friend of mine, we did it, and we raised something ridiculous like $50,000 in 2 weeks.
Oh, that's fantastic.
Just from people going to the restaurant and saying, here's $100. I hope you come back. Good luck. I had my first date there. Like all these amazing stories. So it was really beautiful, actually.
And I know that it is one of the most popular eateries in the neighborhood and in Brooklyn.
It is. It definitely serves as an anchor restaurant, not only because we are 13 years old. There's other restaurants that have popped up, but I don't know if you guys know about Red Hook, but it really is a small little sort of community, sort of cut off from the rest of Brooklyn. It's like this little hook that juts out into the harbor. And in the days when it was really dilapidated. Lots of drugs, lots of abandoned buildings, a lot of artists, a lot of like how Soho developed. A lot of artists sort of settled in there. And so it's always been sort of quiet, but it's definitely a beautiful little spot in Brooklyn. Yeah.
And then it seemed by 2015, you were ready for a new challenge.
Yeah.
Would you like to tell us about that?
Yes, I do want to talk about why it took so long from the Good Fork and to open Insa. Some people would approach us and say, well, what is your second project? Around the time that we opened, other amazing restaurateurs and restaurants sprang up, like Franny's. Andrew Tarlow was doing some amazing stuff, with Diner. And so there was a lot of these chefs, restaurateurs moving from Manhattan to Brooklyn in their neighborhoods, opening it up. And then once they found success, they would open another. And so we would get those inquiries. And for myself and Ben, it was really just about focusing on the Good Fork. And also in the interim, we had a family of our own, 2 children. They hold stuff up for you a little bit. So it took a little while. And we really wanted to do something very, very special for the second project, not just sort of a cookie cutter of what we had at the Good Fork, because I feel like the Good Fork is very site-specific to Red Hook and the community, and the smallness and the way that Ben designed it is just very unique. And we didn't want to just have a carbon copy of it just anywhere. So around that time is when, I guess as a mother, I was taking an active interest in the food of my people, the food. When you asked me the question about, the kind of food that I grew up and just being very picky, there was a part of me sort of, as a culinary student, I guess, like French food is up there, fine dining food is up there, and Korean food is something that I just came home when I was really tired and I just wanted to make something for myself. Then you look around, and around that time, like 3-4 years ago, there's really been a rise in people's appreciation for Korean food and the need for it as well. So we thought, why not pick a big space in Brooklyn, not in Red Hook, somewhere a little bit more accessible? And so we settled on the neighborhood of Gowanus, and we went big. Big or go home was the motto for this time around. So and we decided to do Korean barbecue. And if you guys know, it's sort of the barbecue grill in the center of the table, and it's very communal, and I wanted the food to just focus. A lot of people will come to the Good Fork and say, well, is this Korean food? And I would say, no, it's definitely not Korean food. So I wanted to say, okay, this time it will be traditional Korean food at Insa, and I'm going to approach it, from a educated chef's mind, how to make everything from scratch. Not, like even pushing the envelopes and even making sort of the mother sauces ourselves. So it became a great interest in a big project, and we just were so gung-ho about it. So we opened in December of 2015, and 3 months later, exactly to the date, Pete Wells came and gave us 2 stars, which was a huge boon. And just people have been coming ever since, and it's a beautifully fun restaurant, not just because of the 18 table grills, but also we have 5 karaoke rooms in the back. So I always tell my friends it's like one-stop, Korean fun shopping in terms of food and fun.
So you weren't joking about it being a large place.
No, and I think as a, like you learn, right, as an artisan, as a craftsperson, I think the Good Fork was really born out of that passion of, me wanting to cook and showcase my food, and Ben wanting to build a space. But then you sort of learn about the business end of it. So they do tell you in culinary school never to open a restaurant that is under 75 seats, and never do it with your own money. Those 2 are the cardinal rules, and we broke, both of those rules with the first one. So we wanted to do it right.
We're not going to move on to your third restaurant yet, because I want to talk about the cookbooks and other things.
Sure.
But in the interim, how do you manage both restaurants? How do you choose to divide your time?
Well, there's no real method to the madness. It's great to have a partner, husband, that we share the responsibilities. And as a chef, I go to where they need me the most. Sort of, it's very akin to having children. Like if you give one child a lot of attention, the other one sort of says, what about me? It sort of happens at the restaurant as well. So I sort of go in phases. So I try to make sure that the food, because that's my job as executive chef of these restaurants, is that food is completely, as great as it could be. And that means training a lot of cooks and teaching a lot of young people. So that's really, my job, and Ben's job is to make sure that everything broken is fixed, which is quite often. And also we have an amazing family of staff, and that's how you do it. really with their help. But yeah, it's every day is sort of it's busy and it's a bit of a struggle, but somehow we get it done.
So I do want to talk
Yeah.
about the cookbooks, because it seems to me you're really incredibly busy with these, these two vibrant restaurants, a young family, and yet you've managed to produce two cookbooks.
This is all accidental, actually, I have to tell you. With the Good Fork cookbook, we were about to celebrate, so that came out in 2016. And for the 10th year anniversary of the Good Fork, we thought that it would be great to have something like this. But the actual story behind the cookbook is that it goes back to Sandy. When we were doing the cleanup, I found like 3 books, recipe books, over the years that we have used at the Good Fork. And there were all these recipes bound together, and it was floating in the basement. And I remember picking it up and sort of drying it, laying it all out. I'm thinking, wow, these are a lot of recipes I have here. This could actually make a cookbook. So Ben's like, yeah, we should pitch it. I don't know, find out from somebody. So then I turned to my mentor, Anita, and I was like, how do you get a cookbook published? So then she hooked me up with her agent. And the agent's like, it's simple. You have enough recipes. All you have to do is sort of put it together in a proposal format. And so just write the story of the Good Fork, much like, the stories that I'm telling you guys today. And so I wrote it out as maybe 15 pages total. And I sent it off, and Abrams, among few of the publishers, they were like, this is a great story. You don't really hear too much about mom and pop type restaurants anymore. So that's how this came about. And then it was published on the 10th anniversary of the Good Fork. So
very appropriate.
Pretty cool. Yeah.
And it really is an absolutely, it's a wonderful book. It also has a number of short essays that reflect different parts of your life, from like the backyard. I think Ben has contributed a small chapter.
Oh, sure.
Yeah. So, anyway, it was a wonderful read. And of course, amazing recipes. Now,
thank you.
In terms of the recipe, and I'm like, because and the photographing and things, I presume that is also a very time-consuming part of putting the book together.
Sure, but the time-consuming part of a cookbook is actually writing down all the recipes and testing them out. So since this is a restaurant cookbook, all these recipes have been done many times before, and a lot of times people have, they tried it, tried, trued, and loved. So that was the easy part. And then I tapped Rachel Warden, who is an amazing food writer and a good friend of mine. And so she said, oh, this is the easiest cookbook gig ever. You have all the recipes. I just have to write, I just have to correct what you write and just edit it. And then the photography is done also by friends of mine, Bouge and Zach. And it was their first foray. They usually do architectural and landscape photography, but it's their first foray into food photography, and I think they did an amazing job.
They certainly have. This is like a really a gorgeous book.
Yeah.
And I wanted, in a way, to sort of reflect the global cuisine. You talked about, there's one recipe in particular, and I believe it's one of your signature dishes, the Korean steak and eggs, and that's presumably an amalgamation of Western and Korean influences.
Right. So just that's how we design the menu at the Good Fork, is a little sort of, tongue-in-cheek sort of play on sort of classics, and obviously Americans know steak and eggs as steak and eggs, something that you have for breakfast, a hearty breakfast. But bibimbap is something that Koreans eat all the time, and that's rice with vegetables, egg, and sometimes meat. So I wanted to sort of play and sort of mash those two concepts together and present it in sort of a slightly elevated way. And it really, I thought I was just going to have that on the menu, the first year for a couple of months, but it became a favorite. And, so that is a signature dish that I've never taken off the menu.
Right,
And,
well,
and sometimes I really want to take it off the menu, but I can't.
And there's like thinking like you have like you illustrate how to make dumplings. Not the easiest thing for the first-time dumpling maker,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Fantastic. Just anyway,
Yeah.
it's a fabulous book.
Thank you.
But I also want to share, then, or talk about your next book,
Right. So this book really
Korean Home Cooking.
came right at the heels of opening up Insa. And so Insa, like I said, was opened 2015, at December of 2015. And like 3 months later, my editor comes to me and says, I think it's time for you to write a Insa cookbook. And I said, no, too much going on. I can't possibly do it now. But she said, we have to strike while the iron is hot. I think it's editor speak for like, it's now or never. But I didn't want to do an Insa cookbook. So she and I, we sort of brainstormed about how best to put forth some recipes that I feel like is an introductory cookbook to people who might not know Korean food, but also really do a deep dive so that people who did grow up with the food, like myself, I'm an immigrant, but really second generation in terms of culture. And I meet a lot of second generation Koreans. It's like, oh, I have memories of eating certain types of foods, but I don't really know how to make it. So I really pushed a lot of ideas for this cookbook. So it's very different in its approach, in that I wanted a photograph for every single recipe. Because for me, when you pick up a cookbook, I want to know what it should look like,
Right.
just so that I know if I've messed up or not. So for that one, it's pretty special in that I was able to get a photograph for every single recipe, including the desserts. And also there's about 13 how-tos. And so you talked about how in this book, there's step-by-step process of how to make dumplings, and I wanted to go a little bit further than that with the Korean home cooking. And it's been received very well so far. New York Times put it on their best fall cookbook list, which was great. They even sent me on a little book tour this year, so I was able to talk about the book in other cities, and I really love now in the age of Instagram and social media, people that I don't know, they've picked up the book or maybe gifted the book, and the people they make the recipes and then they tag me on Instagram, say this is what I meant for, and that to me is like that's why you write cookbooks, is to share your food.
And you also illustrate, I'm sure, I know it'd be difficult for people at the back to see this, but like, for instance, many of the common ingredients used in Korean cooking, which is really also very helpful in locating and finding the right ingredients. It's really fantastic.
So I think it's important, especially if you're introducing, an ethnic cuisine like Korean food, where some people might not know about the pantry at all. So it's really important to discuss the ingredients, and then it sort of demystifies everything. I think that people in general, they think, oh, Korean food, I've had it a couple of times, it must be so hard to make, because it just seems so foreign. But once you get, a small little pantry going, it actually is a very simple cuisine to master.
Do you want to highlight a couple of the Korean ingredients?
Sure, the Korean ingredients, just like I liken Korean food to Italian cooking, in that the Italian pantry is very small. You have your amazing olive oil, you have, great canned tomatoes, some anchovies and amazing pastas. And you could make a myriad of ingredients using fresh produce, likewise with Korean food. So in the pantry, you have sort of the mother sauces of Korean food, which is basically a soy sauce, beautifully brewed soy sauce, not the fake kind. And then you have a chili paste called gochujang that adds spice, as well as chili powder, which is called gochugaru. And then a good rice wine vinegar, good quality rice. And then with that, with seasonal vegetables, you could make almost every side dish that is in the book. And there's a thing called banchan, it means side dishes. And half of that book is actually about the side dishes, which is when you are creating a Korean table, you have your rice and your soup, very much like sort of the Japanese and the Chinese culture. So you have your rice and your soup, and that is yours. And then in the middle of the table, you have all these side dishes that you share. Seasonal vegetables, perhaps that's pickled, and that's the kimchi. That the ubiquitous, everybody knows about kimchi, and then there's also, what to do with, fresh spinach or soybean sprouts, something stewed like a tough cut of beef, that could be like a side dish. So all these little side dishes you share, making a very communal sort of eating experience, which is, I think that's what Korean food is all about.
Well, it sounds so...
And it also has, bibimbap, which everybody knows what it is now.
I beg your pardon? Which is?
Bibimbap, that's sort of the rice with the various vegetables on top with the sauce. That's a really big hit at Insa. And then, of course, the Korean fried chicken, which really isn't that traditional. It really sort of came about in the past 20 years or so. And then bulgogi, which is sort of the marinated beef. And in that book also there's some, how to make Korean barbecue at home, and side sauces and stuff like that. So I think hopefully it's approachable for a lot of people.
I think it is. And it's funny you mentioned kimchi, because you have a whole section, and I think you've got 9 different varieties of kimchi in the book.
Right.
Now, I've decided, I think kimchi, once you get the taste for it, it's actually kind of addictive.
Absolutely.
And why do you think that is? Why do you think that once you like it, it's like you crave it?
Well, it has that umami. It has that umami, this whole fancy word that chefs and foodies talk about, this umami flavor. And I think that when you have something fermented, like kimchi, once you get it, like you said, you're addicted to it and you need it. And also, never mind the fact that it's very good for you. It has incredible probiotics. It's lacto-fermented food that is supposed to be good for your, for your digestive tract. It's sort of magical food, and UNESCO, I think, said this sort of a cultural heritage thing. They designated kimchi as this, cultural heritage of Korea, and rightly so. And my father used to say before he passed, he was like, Korean people have kimchi juice flowing through their veins and not blood, because they want it with every meal. And it's just funny to me to go back to the very first question that you asked me. My grandmother would have to wash off the kimchi when I was little because it was too spicy and I didn't like the funky smell or the taste. And so then I would just have this limp, washed off piece of cabbage, and that's what I ate.
Can you talk, and forgive me, I'm going to mispronounce this, but sohnmat?
Sohnmat.
Okay, sohnmat.
Sohnmat. I wanted to actually name this book Sohnmat, but it was turned down by Abrams. They said no one's going to know how to pronounce it. And anyway, it means a beautiful thing in Korean. It means the taste of your hands. And it refers to someone's level of enthusiasm for food and cooking. So, for instance, I would go over to your house and say, we're going to Karen's house, and, there was praise, people say, okay, Karen has the best sohnmat, in the village, which means you have the touch, you have sort of the gift. Yeah. And I really like that, the notion, and that word, because it means so much to me as a cook, as a chef, as a mother. This capability of someone putting in their love and their touch and their spin in whatever they're making. So it's not so much following a recipe, but just and taking that recipe and sort of putting your influence or your touch, to the food.
And an instinct, right?
In an instinct, because recipe following could be kind of boring, and sometimes you might not have what the recipe calls for. So to utilize your smarts and say, okay, maybe I could sort of substitute this ingredient for that ingredient, and if I do this that way, then I could turn it into something. All of that means sohnmat. It's just your personal touch.
Right.
Yeah.
Good. Well, I think we're going to finish with addressing your third major project.
Yeah,
which,
and last.
Yeah.
Very last
Oh, really?
one.
You think it would be the last?
Yes.
Which is really incredible. And perhaps you could tell the audience
Sure.
about what you're intending to
So
do.
our last project is going to be this historic landmark space, 374 Fulton Street, and it is in downtown Brooklyn. And it once housed a fabulously famous restaurant called Gage Tollner. And I spoke to some of you guys earlier about your remembrances. It is definitely a place that sort of touches people here. It opened its doors in 1879, and I think in the 125 years that it was in existence, it only changed hands about 4 or 5 times, meaning families own this restaurant. It closed down February 14 of 2004, and since then, it has been an Arby's, a TGI Friday, a T-shirt shop, a nail salon, another T-shirt shop, just all kinds of crazy businesses that had nothing to do with the interior space. So Landmarks allowed Arby's to go in there so long as they sort of built around all the historic units that they couldn't touch. The 125-year-old woodwork, the tapestry, the mirrors, and the gas lamps that they used to light every night. So anyway, for the past 3 years, my husband and I, along with our partner Sinjin Frizzell, who also owns a restaurant in Red Hook called Fort Defiance, we have been scheming to bring this restaurant back. And it turns out that other restaurateurs in Brooklyn have also looked at this space. So there was a lot to consider, obviously, when you're opening up a restaurant. For me, for these 2 projects, it was really about the food and the concept. For us with Gage Tollner, it really is about piece of history and wanting to be a part of the team that brings this historic restaurant back. It was the third landmarked interior, I think, after Grant's Tomb and New York Public Library. So it is pretty intense when you walk into this space. It is pretty dilapidated because of everything that's been in there since 2004. But we're trying to bring it back, polishing up the brass, replacing carpet, things that we can replace, and just basically bringing the glory days back of Gage Tollner, hopefully. And in terms of menu, that's my job, I have been studying the 125-year-old menus, and one of my culinary superheroes, Edna Lewis, cooked there in the late, I want to say, 1990s, I think, shortly before she passed away. And Peter Ashkenazi, who was then a restaurant owner and the building owner, brought her in as sort of a last-ditch effort to get people to come back to Gage Tollner. And of course, I hope a lot of you guys know about Edna Lewis, just amazing, remarkable Southern chef, who was very prolific in not just cooking, Southern cuisine, but as well French and other cuisines as well. She wrote some amazing cookbooks, one of which is Taste of Country Cooking. So she definitely is one of my heroes, and to pay homage to her and her presence there. So I'm recipe testing a lot of stuff at home. So we want it to be an accessible place. It used to be a grand restaurant, so we want it to be a grand restaurant, but not fancy. So we want everybody who has recollection of Gage Tollner to come back and sort of feel the energy and the beauty of the room, and hopefully be wowed by the service and the food. Don't want to make it too complicated at all. The more that I learn about restaurants and cooking, the simpler the better. You just have to execute it really, really well. So we're nervous about it because it's so much a part of Brooklyn history. But I'm glad that 3 of us get to do it and not a big restaurant group, because I think 3 of us, in many ways, we have a lot to bring to the table in how this historic Brooklyn restaurant comes back to life.
Well, it's such a fitting note to conclude our part of the discussion, because it really is a remarkable thing to do, and it really sounds wonderful. And I can't think it was going to be in better hands.
Oh, well.
Yeah, absolutely. And are you still hoping for a full opening, or?
We are. So we just broke ground a couple of weeks ago, and we're working with amazing teams of architects and craftsmen, and just a whole beautiful group of people that we've put together. So we're shooting for fall. I can't say a date yet because you just never know.
No, of course.
It also depends on the landmarks too,
Yes.
like what they approve and what they don't approve. So, but we're super excited. So yeah, definitely look out for its opening. Hopefully, fall of this year.
Well, I want to thank you so much, and I know we're going to have 3 restaurants to visit in the future. But before we finally conclude for tonight, we would like to take some questions from the audience.
Sure. Oh, thank you, thank you, guys. Yes, sir.
Hi, we'll be taking questions on the microphone so we can capture it for the recording. So please wait until the microphone is passed to begin.
Hi.
Hello.
I have very good memories of Gage Tollner. I think I was there in 2004 when I went to BAM, and it was a private party.
Mm-hmm.
I went there with my mother and with college friends. I am so disappointed because I have not been back and seen that they could ruin that. I hope you put it back. I hope you leave the same name, as Gage Tollner.
Yes, so that we are trying to do that. There, like with anything, there's some obstacles. We are pretty sure, we're not 100% sure that we could get the name Gage Tollner back, but we're working on it and we're trying very hard. So I think that we will be successful in doing that. And there's lots of stories. A lot of people still remember it in the most amazing way. So that's why the pressure's on. So we'll do our best. Thank you.
I thank you very, very
Thank
much
you.
for doing this, and good luck.
Thank
And
you
I'll
so
be
much.
there. Thank you.
Hello. I was wondering if every time you open a new restaurant, are you bringing staff that you've already worked with and trained on to the next endeavor, or are they all separate types of training for your culinary crew?
That's a very good question. It's true. With any sort of industry, any sort of business, great people are sometimes difficult to find. But when I alluded to the fact of the way that my husband and I approach restaurants is really as a family. So making sure that you are teaching. For instance, at the Good Fork, there's all these young chefs out there now that have, gone through the doors of the Good Fork, and they all sort of, that's how old I am. Like, they call me, it's like, hey, chef, I'm making a career move. Should I stay here? Should I do that? So I think, mentored a lot of young chefs, and then they come back around and they say, okay, I've gone out and done that, and did the Manhattan tour. Now I want to come back. So people come back. It's it is great to have that. So we've been very lucky. There are several. When we opened up Insa, there were several people who had sort of graduated from the Good Fork, and then when they heard that we're opening Insa, they wanted to come back and work with us. Likewise, it's happening with Gage Tollner as well. So then the family just sort of grows, which is the other aspect of being a chef that I really love, is to teach young people about the culinary arts as well as the business of restaurants. I usually tell them if they want to do their own, I say, don't do it. Just get that out there first, and then I give them advice. Because it is hard. It is hard because of that. But there's a lot of enthusiasm from a lot of my, graduates. They want to come back and be a part of the opening team of Gage Tollner, which is really wonderful. Yeah. Oh. No, she has a microphone. I know she has a microphone.
I think you earned another spot to tell us how you renovated Gage Tollner. So let's put the order in now and take lots of pictures and be ready for the next presentation.
Yes, yes, yes. I want to have a time-lapse camera in the corner as we build it, and I'm collaborating with some artist friends of mine to make some visual creations of how this historic place, comes back to life. I can't wait. I really can't wait.
Are you going to manage to have the gas lighting?
So that's a very good question. The gas lights are landmarked, so we cannot remove them. Neither did the T-shirt store. They were just covered up. They are no longer obviously gas-powered, but they're still there in the original shape.
PSE&G did it for Peter.
You know Peter Ashkenazi?
Yeah.
Yes, yes, yes.
And-
Did what?
Put in gas lighting.
We cannot do that. Yeah, I wish. Oh my gosh. Every night I wanted my husband to go up there, climb on a ladder, and light each lamp, but that is not to be.
Do you have this postcard?
I do. Oh, that's wonderful.
I would like to take this opportunity to congratulate you and your husband in reopening Gage Tollner.
Thank you.
I think you will have a wonderful life there because your husband is a very friendly person. I met him and I enjoyed speaking with him.
Yes. I have to get your name afterwards, so I have to tell him that you said hello,
Yes,
for sure.
In the old Gage Tollner,
Yeah.
I've been there many times, and I used to take a lot of Japanese businessmen.
That's right. There's
So
a lot
I'll
of,
be there. Matter of fact, I plan to go to Insa on Sunday with another friend who
That's
we love
awesome.
to taste restaurants.
Great. Thank you so much. I have to tell you about just one thing about my husband. I'm so glad you brought him up. He really, when I opened up the Good Fork, he had not one day's work at a restaurant. He was a complete, for an actor / woodworker, he had never worked at a restaurant, which is so odd because I think all actors work in restaurants, but not this one. And the genuineness of his heart, he's the type that when we would, close down after service, if there was a couple lingering and it was pouring rain outside, he would drive them home if they were close by. Like, that's the kind of dude he is, and that's the kind of memories that people have about the Good Fork. So we're hoping that we could transfer everything that we have learned and done, at the Good Fork and at Insa and apply it times 10 to Gage and Tollner because the expectation is much higher now because of the history. So yes, we'll do our best. Thank you.
Sohui, thank you. And I just listening to this reaction for Gage and Tollner, and I'm not, this native New Yorker I'm so excited to find out more about this restaurant. But, and there's obviously such an affection, and I think it's wonderful that you're documenting it.
Yes.
Because I have to say that, I could see this on some, CBS Sunday Morning or the Food Network. I'm really feeling this, so I just wanted to register that. So get
Thank
on
you.
it. So
Yeah, thank you. I think it's a great idea too. Not so much to sell it to Food Network, but really, as like there has to be. There's an archive already. The Brooklyn Historical Society has boxes and boxes of memento, like the little postcard that you have, the original menus, signed menus by various celebrity figures throughout the years. It's just magical how much there is already, but definitely it coming back as a restaurant, I think it needs to be documented for sure. So,
what are you thinking about for a menu for this new restaurant?
so the menu is going to be. As most of you know, Gage and Tollner was an original oyster chop house. Back in the day, 1879, Fulton Street, they had oyster beds. You could just literally walk out to the harbor and just harvest a bunch of oysters, and there were oyster carts everywhere. So that's how it got started. So the basic umbrella idea of an oyster and chop house, and to me, that says sort of Americana food, doesn't it? It says classics like, broiled clam bellies, oysters, Rockefeller, simple salads, classics like Caesar, perhaps tableside. We don't know if we're going to do that, but, like classics And I think that for the most part, New Yorkers are a very big foodie town, lots happening, it's very quick moving, but I think there's a large population that they crave the classics, the way that it used to be done, with the modern sensibility. And of course, you know, I have a real passion for using seasonal stuff and great stuff and happy cows and happy, you know. So I want to utilize everything that I've learned in the culinary field and apply it to Gage and Tollner menu as it was, but also bring it, you know, to the next, I guess, to the current modern times. So yeah, I would say that it'll be classic American. Yes. Which is a big jump from Korean barbecue, I know. People are going to be very confused.
I'm so glad you came tonight, because I
Thank
came
you.
because of Gage and Tollner.
Oh, great.
Yes, I've been there a couple of times, but a young couple, well, they're not young anymore, but they were at the time, were one of the owners, John Simmons.
Oh, wow, okay.
And a partner of his.
That's
I live
great.
in Clinton Hill, near
That's
Pratt Institute, and I think he and his wife were both Pratt graduates,
Right.
but from the cooking classes there.
Right, that's right. So you know, so we have the lease to, obviously, the restaurant, the basement where a lot of the prep will take place. It's a sprawling restaurant. It's very big, and I think the ground level, the main restaurant, will have about 100 seats, including the bar, and there is going to be a raw bar as well, where you can't sit, but you'll be able to see the beautiful oysters and clams and, you know, offering from the sea of the day. But also we have a second floor, and they used to throw lots of great parties, private events, and so we are going to have 2 private dining rooms upstairs, as well as a tucked away bar. It's going to be called the Sunken Harbor Club, and that's sort of a, you know, tiki bar meets Explorers Club, again, focusing on classic cocktails, the Sazerac, Manhattans, you know, the classic martini, and my partner Sinjin excels at that. So in terms of food and beverage, we got it covered. In terms of the party scene, I think we're gonna get that going with the private dining rooms as well. So designing that interior upstairs is not landmark, so we have a little bit more freedom in designing that space. So hopefully it'll be all great.
Well, I am going to forward the email that the library sent me about this talk to John and Marie.
Please do, thank you.
Thank you very much. I have a question. You know, people are native speakers, and they grow up someplace, they can speak a language, and you go to their country or someplace, and you can't quite make it, but you just about make it. A native speaker will inevitably be more eloquent than you are. So how do you make a menu that has some mystery to it accessible? Like, I've been in many countries and traveled a great deal, and find my way, not like Anthony Bourdain, who goes someplace and eat anywhere.
Right.
But I find that, how do you make it accessible? Like, the question comes up, well, if you know the chef, you can get something that's off the menu, and it's always terrific. So how do you educate the customer that walks in as a novitiate someplace? And how do, you know, makes it interesting for everybody? So most of the time you look at it, and if you're in a Chinese restaurant, it's 2 from letter A and 3 from page 3 and something else, all of which have obscure and not native speaking kind of communication.
Mm-hmm. That's a very good question. How do you make food accessible and also sort of interesting? What is that? I feel like that's what the Good Fork menu, as I envisioned it in the beginning, 14 years ago. I wanted to present a lot of the classics. And just put a little spin in it, right? So the accessibility is people's way of recognizing it, right? So you say make clams casino. Everybody knows pretty much what that is, right? And you have a sort of a relative expectation of what it's going to taste like. But imagine if you had this oyster clams casino with some ingredient that I'm not going to tell you that I put in it. All you know as a guest, as someone experiencing the food, you would think this is of solid clams casino. It might even be the best that I've ever had, but there is something in there that I can't quite put my finger on. And I think that's what chefs strive to do, is that they're not going to perhaps say it on the menu, perhaps, or advertise it, or even articulate it to you in any other way than by you experiencing the food in its presentation and in its taste. So that's the trickiest thing, right? Because you can give anybody a recipe and say, okay, this is Clams Casino. What is going to make your Clams Casino shine more than this guy, right? And I think that has, to go from Clams Casino to the idea of sohnmat, it really is sort of the transferring of my passion, my knowledge of food into a certain dish. And really, if I've done my homework, then, you might not know what I put in it, but you hopefully will walk away and say, that was the best version of Clams Casino I've ever had. And so I think that's what a lot of cooks and chefs aspire to be or to do. And so you let me know in a year if I've succeeded.
Last question.
Hi, I'd like to congratulate you on the cookbooks. They're
Thank you.
absolutely beautiful.
Thank you.
I studied painting at Pratt, and I look at cookbooks like paintings. And the photographs of how you compose a dish are just exquisite. I mean, they're really, really beautiful. At Pratt, we used to say, you go to juniors for your birthday, you go to Gage and Tollner for graduation.
Yes.
So, congratulations.
Thank you.
Best of luck.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate that. Thank you so much for having me. This was super fun.
Sohui,
Yes.
before you get up and before you leave the stage, we would like to make a presentation to you. In fact, we are going to ask you to leave the stage. We're going to ask you to join us at the podium, if we may.
Okay.
Okay? Don't look so worried. So first of all, Sohui, I just want to thank you so much because your talk was a revelation. It was so fascinating, finding out your experience of being as a chef, an entrepreneur, a restaurateur, and your 3 restaurants. I mean, I have to confess, I haven't been to the first 2 yet, but I'm definitely going, and I hope many of us here tonight will also do that. And of course, I think we could see there was quite a lot of interest and excitement about Gage and Tollner. Again, thank you so much for sharing your knowledge and expertise. You were a wonderful representative of an artisan, so thank you so much. Thank you. And we would like to make a presentation to you, and to do so is our Executive Director, Victoria Dengel.
Thank you, Karen. And Sohui, I am so excited just sitting here listening to you, really your energy, your creativity. It comes through, and your capacity to do all of this and be a mother, and it's really amazing. And you're really a gift to this world. That's what I was thinking, how you really are for all of your contributions, and then to take a restaurant and bring it back to life, so thank you. So on behalf of the General Society of Mechanics and Tradesmen, founded 1785, we express our gratitude to Sohui Kim, chef and restaurateur, and creative genius, let's face it, she is. Yes, yes, yes. Author of the Good Fork and Korean Home Cooking, for her participation in the General Society Artisan Lecture Series. So thank you very much, Sohui.
Thank you so much. Thank you. I really appreciate this.
Thank you.
That was gorgeous. Thank you so much.
And normally I feel really good giving you what I'm going to give you, but I feel like I've given you another thing to do. So we have made you a lifetime member of the library.
Yay!
So in your spare time. Come and visit.